And Father, again, we want your blessing on the Bible study tonight. So please give us good understanding and good attention. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, the book of Hosea, again, as we continue to progress through there. And we're going to just basically look at a little bit more of some introduction material tonight. And I'm not in a big rush. Don't mind how long it takes. There's just a lot of really good items in here that I've picked out. Then we can go through the verse by verse. That's easy enough once that time comes. So the book of Hosea, and last time, I think, was it last week? No, it was 2 weeks ago. Just went through some very introductory material as to the writer and the book, where it took place, what was going on politically and around the world. And tried to give some historical scenes, look at the key people and the important characteristics of the book. And then we talked finally last time about the 5 cycles of judgment and restoration that are in the book. And what I'd like to do tonight now is just pick it up there with just some more important characteristics about this book. And in this book, what you're going to find as well is that there are several descriptions of Israel that illustrate what she's like in the eyes of God as he goes through here. Now again, remember that this is just prior to the northern kingdom being taken away captive, and the southern kingdom will be taken captive not long, about 120 years after that. So they've been through a lot, and they have rebelled against God for quite some time. And so the things that we see here are God having been patient with them for a very, very, very long period of time, even though they've experienced the judgment that comes as consequences of sin. They are facing, as far as the book is concerned, they are facing the worst of it by far. So I want you to notice in chapter 4 of Hosea and verse number 16, the first description that we get of the nation of Israel. Chapter 4, verse number 16, "For Israel slideth back as a backsliding heifer. Now the Lord will feed them as a lamb in a large place." He calls her a backsliding heifer. She's a young cow that refuses to bear the yoke. This idea of the backsliding heifer, the one that won't put the yoke on her neck and won't labor. So it's an illustration of what God was seeing in Israel, that she's a young heifer. He's trying to get her to work and labor for him, and she keeps throwing the yoke off. Just backsliding, moving backward, not allowing him to put it on. If you've ever saddled a horse, as you know, they keep moving backward on you, and he just is the most aggravating thing in the world when you're trying to throw that thing and they either sidestep you or step backward. And that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to put the yoke. Remember, his yoke is easy, his burden's light. He's trying to put that on Israel, and she just keeps backing up and backing up. So she's a young cow, and she refuses to bear the yoke that God wants to put on her. Then in chapter number 6 and verse number 4, he gives this description. "O Ephraim," remember that the phrase, that the name Ephraim is to correspond to the northern kingdom. "O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judah, what shall I do unto thee? For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early dew, it goeth away." So he describes Israel in this capacity, a morning cloud and an early dew. In other words, again, as he's already given us the interpretation there, it's short-lived goodness, bursts of goodness, but they only last for a short period of time, and then they turn again, and they can't endure through the trials of rejecting the idols or rejecting the false gods of other nations. And so he's describing them again this way. He ends that verse number 4, "As the early dew, it goeth away." So they have these periods, very short periods of doing right, and then they fade off. It's interesting when you go through here, you can start to see how different Christians will slot into some of these descriptions. You know, God wanting to put the yoke on a Christian, and they keep backsliding. You'll see then this idea of the morning cloud. And we've all been up early in the morning, and we've seen, particularly where we live, we can just see all of Canberra shrouded in cloud, it looks like. But as the sun starts to come up, you can just see that dissipate and go away. And that's what he's looking at. He said, you're just like that. You're the morning cloud, you give promise, and then you're gone. As soon as the heat rises, you're gone. Here's the early dew in the morning, and then you're gone. And a lot of Christians are like that. They just seem like they're going to be very promising, and then the heat comes and they fade away. All right? Then he says in chapter 7 and verse number 4, Hosea chapter 7, verse number 4, he says, they are all adulterers, as an oven heated by the baker, who ceaseth from raising after he hath kneaded the dough until it be leavened. All right, so we got the image now of this, a heated oven. And he's talking about the baker trying to put his bread in there. He's got it all ready. He's kneaded it. It's ready to roll. You can't do that too much or you ruin it, right, ladies? You don't want to knead it too much. So he's ready. He's got the bread ready, and he wants to stick it in the oven. And here's this heated oven. They're all adulterers, as an oven heated by the baker. Well, that's not good. Always heated and ready to commit wickedness. Always ready to commit wickedness. Sort of corresponding with this previous one as the early cloud and the rain. The morning cloud and the early dew, I should say, not rain. Just short bursts of goodness, and then they go away. And here you have this. They're always ready. They're always ready. When the wickedness comes, they dive into it. Again, I see Christians like that. Maybe churches like that. Maybe maybe you might see yourself amongst these. I don't know. But you would look at it and you'd say, there are believers today who they just seem that as soon as they get influenced by something wicked, something wrong, that's what they do. They're a heated oven. They're like adulterers. And that's, again, the illustration. They're ready, always ready to do the wrong thing. Chapter 7 and verse number 8. Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned, right? A cake not turned. Burnt on one side, raw on the other. And as such, not edible. Right? You put the pancakes on the grill, it's all hot. Love that smell. Can't eat them anymore. It's unfortunate. They eat pancakes at my house, I watch. And you watch the bubbles burst on top. It's ready to flip. It's ready to turn. Not here. They just leave it. Let it burn. It's not going to cook. It's not going to taste right. Just burnt on one side and raw on the other. Overdoing it on one thing and underdoing it on the other. Israel, they seem to go to extreme on this side and then an extreme on that side. They're half-baked. They are half-baked. And they're just worthless. Because God's just looking at them saying, you're just like this cake that's unturned. I can't do anything with you. I can't eat you. Right? I can't serve you up. I can't use you. You're just worthless. Why? Because he's mixed himself among the people. Christian, be careful who you mix yourself with. Be careful who your best friends are. Now, I say this sort of thing all the time. It's I hope some take it to heart. Our best friends need to be the people of this church and other believers. That's who our best friends should be. And of course, I always have to follow that by saying it doesn't mean we can't have friends outside of this church, nor does it mean that we can't have friends who aren't saved. But we got to be careful, because they'll influence us if we start mixing ourselves with them. If that's where we find our counsel, if that's where we find our comfort, if this is where we find our best fellowship is outside with unsaved people, you're going to be a cake not turned. Okay? Just useless for the Lord. All right, chapter 7, verse 11. He gives a lot of descriptions in chapter 7. And he says in chapter 7, verse number 11, Ephraim also is like a silly dove without heart. They call to Egypt, and they go to Assyria. A silly dove. The word silly, again, when you study that, just has to do with without sound judgment and without proper guidance. And so he looks at Israel and he says they are without sound judgment, without proper guidance. Again, we see some Christians in that sense. A silly dove. Why are they calling to Egypt? Why are they going to Assyria? Assyria is ready to besiege the city of Samaria, the main city, and take them into captivity. right? Why are they going to Assyria? Why are they making friends with them? Assyria hates them. Why are they calling to Egypt? I mean, God's explicit statement was, stay away from Egypt. Just keep right away from it. But, oh Egypt, we need you. Silly dove. Chapter 7, verse number 16. They return, but not to the Most High. They are like a deceitful bow. Their princes shall fall by the sword for the rage of their tongue. This shall be their derision in the land of Egypt. So the description that we have here is one of a deceitful bow. A deceitful bow is one that is aimed at the target but never hits it. Is always going wide of the mark. A deceitful bow would be one where, I just forgot what the term is, the feathers, the knock, right? The knock. One side's removed. So you're aiming it straight, you're holding it straight, you're ready to let her go. Right? And God said, Israel, that's what you're like. I got everything lined up and I let you go. Wide of the mark. You deceitful bow. You don't shoot where I want you to shoot. Have you ever been that way? I have. I'm not laughing about it. I'm smiling because I'm just letting you know I'm with you. I've been that way. The Lord had me all lined up and ready to go, and He let me go. Terrible time in life, isn't it, when that happens? We want to be as arrows in the hand of a mighty hunter, and He hits the target every time. If any of you are a good bow hunter, let me know. I got a fox I need you to take care of. All right. Chapter 8, verse number 8. A fox got one of my chooks this week. Yeah. I'm still bitter about it. I am. Even my son says to me, Dad, it happens all the time. Yeah. Not to my chooks. No, sir, I've already ordered a trap. Yes, sir. And he's going to become target practice. Does anybody want a foxtail when I'm finished? Maybe a few. Yeah, all the hands go up. The kids. Excellent. Yeah, I was thinking about how that's like the devil. The devil's like that too. They just case the place. That's how a fox is. He cases the place out. We've been letting our chooks out. This is extra. We've been letting our chooks out since we got them. Since December. And without an issue. I said that morning, I was sitting there with a cup of coffee in my hand looking at my chooks. I said to my wife, I love our chooks. They are like family to me. And a fox came in and took one of them. And I thought, that's like the devil. He cases the place out, and you guarantee that fox has been watching our place for weeks, figuring out where they are, where we're not, and when he can come and get them. That's how the devil does it. He's patient. Sits there and stalks, and I'm going to make a message out of that, I think, one of these days, if I already didn't. Chapter 8 and verse number 8. Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles as. Notice we're doing these like and as, two most important words in the Bible. Like and as. Be among the Gentiles as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. It's a broken vessel, a broken pot. It can't hold what it was made for. And so He's designed Israel to bear His light and His glory. And they are this vessel, though, there's no pleasure in them. Every time He goes looking for what should be in there, it's gone. Christian, how are you? God's designed you for something? If He were to come around and come looking in your life, would He always find it's not in there? Because we're a vessel with holes in it, maybe. Or we keep tipping ourselves out. So it's a broken vessel, a broken pot, and it cannot hold what God designed it for. That's Israel. Now, chapter 8, verse number 9. They have deeply corrupted themselves, as in the days of Gibeah. Therefore He will remember their iniquity. He will visit their... I'm in the wrong chapter. I'm thinking, this is going nowhere fast. Chapter 8, verse 9. For they are gone up to Assyria, a wild ass alone by himself. Ephraim hath hired lovers. So verse 9 tells us that Israel's like a wild ass, a wild donkey. Now, you know what that is? Stubborn and untamable. Where I pastored in America, it's famous for the wild donkeys that roam around. Wild mules, I should say, donkeys, jackasses that roam around. And they're all over the place. It's famous for them. People come all over the place to look at these things. But you can't do anything with them. They're worthless. They are stubborn. Yeah, well, you can't shoot them because they're protected, but they're stubborn, and you can't train them. You can't do anything with them. They're just wild asses. Okay? And that's what Israel was like. Can't do a thing with it. Can't tame it. Can't ride it. All it does is eat food and cause you a lot of trouble. Stubborn. Yeah. Kevin. Chapter 9, verse number 16. Okay, another description. Ephraim is smitten, their root is dried up, they shall bear no fruit. Yea, though they bring forth, yet will I even slay even the beloved fruit of their womb. Their root, they're a dried up root. They're unable to produce fruit. They're dead. And that's the way a root is. Once the root's dead, you're all over with. If you got a live root, you might have some hope of seeing something grow up, right? We already know that. But here, the root is gone. It's dead. Can't produce anything. And all it's good for, again, is just to be plucked up and burnt. It's a dried up root. And then lastly, chapter 10 and verse number 1, Israel is as an empty vine. He bringeth forth fruit unto himself. According to the multitude of his fruit, he hath increased the altars. According to the goodness of his land, they have made goodly images. He's an empty vine. And an empty vine is one that doesn't produce the fruit that the husbandman is looking for. Okay, it's an empty vine. So it's like the illustration of Luke chapter number 13, where he comes around looking at the fig tree. 3 years, it's borne nothing. Cut it down. Why cumbereth it the ground? A similar thing here. An empty vine, going and looking for grapes. The grapes aren't there. Tony, what do you do with the grape bush that doesn't produce grapes? What do you do? So you cut it right back.
And throw it away.
Yeah. So the first year, would you do that the first year if the grapevine, you would prune it real good?
That's right.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
See whatever next year.
Yeah. Second year?
Put another one.
Yeah. Okay. So there you got it from the expert. All right. It's an empty vine. And the husbandman comes looking. There's nothing there. It's time to throw it away. All right. Now, all of those images are to help us to understand something. That God's ready to judge the northern kingdom. He's ready to judge Judah as well, but they get a little bit more time. But he's looking at this northern kingdom of Israel, and he's saying, now everything I just said about you is bad. You're like this, you're like this, you're like this. He's not illustrating her as being something worthwhile any longer. And again, if anybody says, man, God's really impatient and mean, they've had 1,000 years of God's blessing and patience. And now he's saying to him, you're like a cake unturned, you're like a silly dove, you're like this, you're like this, you're like this. So enough is enough. And we just see there that God's Spirit shall not always strive with man. That's what he said. And eventually he's just going to cut it down. Now there's another important characteristic in this book that in spite of what we just looked at, the love of God for this nation. And it is unbelievable. So back to chapter number 2. Now I know right now what we're doing, we're just skipping around. You say, what's the point to this? The point is just laying foundation. That is all I'm doing right now. When we go through this, we'll have covered all this. We won't need to stop. We'll just be able to bang it out verse by verse. God's love for Israel. Chapter 2 and verse number 14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. So we see a couple things there. First of all, he purposed to allure his wife back from her adulteries or after her adulteries. No matter how much Israel had done this, and even though God said, I'm done with you and I'm going to cut you down, I still love you. So we get clear to the book of Romans, and Paul says about the nation of Israel, he said, so as God cast off his people, God forbid. Even though they've been taken out and the wild olive branch has been grafted back in, he still looks at that nation and says, I still love you. And that's remarkable to me. And so what he said there in this illustration of Hosea's life is, I'm going to allure her back. I'm going to attempt to draw her to myself, out to the wilderness where I can speak comfortably to her. All right, so it's used, this word allure, to tempt by an offer of something good, or something that's an apparent, something that would be flattering to her, something that would reward your effort to follow through. Alluring. Okay? He said, I want to allure my wife back and reward her. And then again, that's the second one. His love for Israel is expressed by the fact he said, I want to speak comfortably to her. Okay, so imagine your spouse committing adultery over and over and over and over and over and over again, and your attitude is, she deserves the judgment, or he deserves the judgment, and that's what I'm going to allow. But when it's finished, I'm going to bring that man or woman back. I want to speak in such a way as to bring them back. And then I want to talk to them in a comfortable way. I'm not going to hold it over their head and say, you did this and you did that, and you're going to spend the rest of your life making it up to me. He's just simply saying, I want to speak comfortable words to you. And that is the grace of God. And that is the essence of forgiveness. He didn't forget what she did. But what he was able to do is say that I'm going to get beyond that and love you in spite of it. Okay? Chapter 2 and verse 15, again, another illustration of the love of God. And I will give her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope, and she shall sing there, as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. So he said, I'm going to express my love for her by restoring her to her vineyards. Again, you know what he's doing? Did I miss something? Chapter 2, verse 15. Chapter 2, verse 15. So what he's saying is, I want to bring her back and give her what she had before she ever even knew what adultery and fornication was. That's love. That's love. So he purposed to restore her to her vineyards. Then verse 16. And it shall be at that day. Now let's stop there for just a moment. That phrase, that day, is a reference to the day of the Lord, which is still future. So what we have in Hosea here is still, it's out beyond 2013 somewhere. Okay? It's the time when Jesus Christ comes back physically to the earth and is reigning on the earth. That is the day of the Lord. Okay? So that's important there. But he says in verse number 16, it shall be at that day, saith the Lord, that thou shalt call me Ishai, and shalt call me no more Baali. Ishai, you're my husband. Baali, you're my Lord. Now the attitude of Israel is going to change toward Jesus Christ. Right now, toward Jesus Christ and anything of the past, it was Baali. I'm here, but I'm just here to serve. I'm your wife, but I'm just your wife because of, or I'm just your wife, but I'm just a possession. I'm just something that you own. That's the way she viewed herself. Baali. But the time will come when Jesus Christ comes back and he restores his people to him, where they will say, Ishai, you're my husband. Okay? Great pictures here. So we see then he foresees the day when his wife calls him husband. What an awful marriage relationship if the wife always only looked at herself as being just a possession. If she was only just there to serve. If she felt that her only role in life was, all I am here for is that I do what he wants me to do. I have no purpose. I don't have any role in the home. I'm just here. I just exist. Baali. But what a change when they view it and say, he's my husband. I'm married to him. And that's what Israel will do. Do you see that? To me, that's a very beautiful picture of what the second coming of Christ will be for the nation of Israel. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 and verse number 4. O Ephraim, what shall I do unto thee? O Judah, what shall I do unto thee? For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early... Oh, what have I done? Yes, as the early dew it goeth away. Sometimes you write a note down, it's perfectly plain when you write it, and then you go back and you think, why did I say that? This is what I'm going for. He lovingly mourned over the lack of commitment of his wife. He's lovingly mourning her. Okay? He is not ranting and raving. He said, this is what you're like. But it's still this loving mourning over her. Okay? Do you see that? Okay. Maybe not. You can throw that one out if you don't like it. Chapter 11 and verse number 4. Chapter 11 and verse number 4. All right. I drew them, that's the nation of Israel, or it's called Ephraim previous to that. I drew them with cords of a man with bands of love. And I was to them as they that take off the yoke on their jaws, and I laid meat unto them. All right, he's reminiscing, or he's looking forward. That's probably a better word. He's looking forward to the days. No, he's reminiscing for the days when he delivered Israel from the land of Egypt, and he's going to deliver them from their enemies, and when he takes away those jaws that are binding them, and he's going to draw them with bands of love. So again, this is just the expression of God's love for his nation. I look forward to, and I look back to the time, and I'm thankful for the time that I delivered you from Egypt. And I'm thankful for the time when I'm going to deliver you from those who are mistreating you and taking advantage of you in your adulteries. I'll draw you with bands of love. Not bands of discipline, not bands of chastisement, but bands of love. Chapter 11, verse number 8. How shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zeboam? Mine heart is turned within me, my repentings are kindled together. So he grieves over the fact that that he was forced to judge Israel. Now remember that God He doesn't want this to happen. He's not looking for it, pleading with his wife, don't continue on in your adulteries. But she continues on. She's forcing his hand. She's forcing him to judge her. But he's mourning that. He says, I'm repenting of that. And I'm grieved over the fact that you make me do this thing. As parents, that's the better way for us to understand it. So many times, you tell your children, here's the rules, here's the boundaries, don't go outside of that or I'm going to give you a spanking, give you a smack. And they go outside of it. And I don't know what you guys are like, but there's been many times where I've just thought, I wish I hadn't have said I was going to do that. I don't want to do that. Man. And I've sat there at times trying to figure out, how can I get around this one? Because I don't want to discipline them, but they forced my hand on it. All right, and that's what God said about the nation. And by the way, that's what he says about some Christians. He just said, look, you force me, you force me, you force me. Eventually I'm going to chasten you, but I don't want to. I don't want to have to do that. In the book of 1 John, he said, there's a sin unto death, and I do not say that you should pray for it. He said, you just push and you push and you push, and eventually, I'm going to take your life. But I don't want to. Right? Okay. Chapter 11, verse number 9. I will not execute the fierceness of mine anger. I will not return to destroy Ephraim. For I am God and not man, the Holy One in the midst of thee, and I will not enter into the city. So he said he's kept back his anger. He showed his love by keeping back his anger for such a long time. And then chapter number 14, we'll look at a few of them here and keep moving. Chapter 14, he expresses his love because he says, I'm going to heal you. 14 verse number 4, I will heal their backslidings, I will love them freely, for mine anger is turned away from him. Obviously looking way forward here, but he's going to keep back his anger. I am so tired, I cannot function. He has purposed to heal Israel in all of her backslidings. Again, He's purposed to love her freely. And then He's purposed in verse number 5 to be as dew unto Israel. I will be as the dew unto Israel. He shall grow as the lily and cast forth his roots as Lebanon. So you notice that at one point they were a dried up root. At one point they were as the dew in the early morning that just faded away. But He says, you know what? I'm going to turn it on you. I'm going to be dew to you. I'm going to be that refreshment to you. You've heard of a green drought? Do you know what a green drought is? Okay, we had a green drought in Kingaroy when I was there. They went a long time with very little rain. But there were times where your grass would be green, the side of the road would be green, and the trees and the bushes would be green. You'd be scratching your head because it hasn't rained, but there was dew. And so it was a green drought because the dew in the morning was sufficient to draw out the colors, but the ground was dry as. All right? That dew can be a major source of refreshment, and that's what He said He'd be to them. And then lastly, verses 5 through 8 together. I will be as dew unto Israel. He shall grow as the lily and cast forth his root as Lebanon. His branches shall spread, and his beauty shall be as the olive tree, and his smell as Lebanon. They that dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall revive as the corn and grow as the vine. The scent thereof shall be as the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, what have I to do any more with idols? I have heard him and observed him. I am like a green fir tree. From me is thy fruit found. Man, what a change. Do you see at the end of that book? What a change in the nation of Israel. He purposed to prosper her. And that was an expression of His love. He was going to prosper her. I don't know. Seems like a good place to end. The next section's a bit negative. The spirit of whoredoms. You want to end on a positive or a negative tonight? Positive. Are you positive? Have you had enough? You haven't had enough? Wow. I take it back. Every bad thing that I've said about you guys. I take it all back. Let's go through the spirit of whoredoms. There is in this book a description of this spirit of whoredoms. And in Scripture, God considers idolatry to be whoredom. He considers it to be like a sexual sin. He calls it whoredom. He calls it fornication whenever they adopted a false idol. So when they would love another idol or they'd build an idol, He'd call it this spirit of whoredom. Fornication, a practice of unlawful commerce with the opposite sex is what that means, okay? So there's the spirit of whoredom that he talks about throughout the book. And it's important to notice that whoredom has a spirit connected to it. We know what we mean when we say a whore. Whoredom is just the way to describe what they do, okay? There's a spirit connected with that. The spirit of whoredoms. So a person can have that spirit, but they may not be carrying it out physically, but they have it going on in their heart. Or a person can just completely yield themselves to it and be guilty of whoredoms in the physical sense as well. And the spirit of whoredoms, again, let's go back to the beginning of the book and let's just watch this thing unfold. Of Hosea. The spirit of whoredoms, the spirit of idolatry, of fornication with other gods. In chapter 1, verse 2, the beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. The spirit of whoredoms had caused Israel to depart from the Lord. And I would say this, that the spirit of whoredoms will cause us to do the same. Now, as I said, this isn't nearly as positive of an ending as the last one was. But you say, well, how could we be guilty of whoredoms? We're saved. We can put false idols in our life, and God told us in the New Testament, flee from idolatry. And idolatry can be almost anything. Whatever you put ahead of God. It can be family. I know that's hard to believe, but we can put family ahead of God, and it becomes an idol to us. There's some very good ministries that deal with families, but they've exalted the family above things that God has said are more important. And they've made an idol out of the family. But we got to be careful with some of that stuff. People make idols out of the television. They make idols out of work. They make idols out of people. It just goes on and on. So we have to be conscious of this fact that we can, in fact, be guilty of the spirit of whoredoms and depart from the Lord. Because of this spirit of whoredoms, God made a series of threats to Israel using Gomer as the example. So chapter 2, verse 3, plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. He says in verse number 3, lest I strip her naked, and set her as in the day that she was born, and make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. He threatened to strip them naked. And then he said again in verse number 3 that he was going to return her to her original condition. Now keep your finger there and look at Ezekiel. So from where you are, you need to go back to the front of your Bible a few pages. Ezekiel chapter 16. So you're in Hosea, the book before that is Daniel, and then the next book before that is Ezekiel, chapter number 16. He said, I'm going to put you back the way you were. I'm going to strip you naked, I'm going to take the clothes that I gave off of you, and I'm going to put you back to the way I found you. And Ezekiel chapter 16 verse 4 says, the way she was. Ezekiel 16:4, and as for thy nativity, your birth, in the day that thou was born, thy navel was not cut. So the umbilical cord wasn't removed. Neither wast thou washed in water to supple thee. So she's been left in the birthing fluids. Thou wast not salted at all, nor swaddled at all. So that was how God found Israel. In His sight, that's what He saw. So He saw a newborn babe that had basically been abandoned, and nothing had been done for it. And He said, because of your whoredoms and your spirit of whoredoms, if you don't stop it, I'm going to put you back in that condition. I'm going to let you go back to where you came from. It's a great warning. Go back to Hosea. There's a great warning in that, guys. Sometimes we can pull and pull and pull and pull against God for so long, and I always imagine it as pulling against a rope. And He's pulling the other direction, and eventually He just goes, you're gone. I'll let you go. If that's what you want so badly, I'm going to let you have it. I'm going to let you go back to the way you came from. I have personally known believers, and I think they're saved, that have pulled against God for so long, and it just seems like God said, okay. And I've watched them go from what you thought was such a godly individual, and they head back, and they're as bad or worse than when they got saved. And you probably know some too. You look at them, you think, I don't know, were they ever born again? I don't know. They seem to be producing the fruit in their life, but there they are now. The spirit of whoredoms. Man, you guys we got to be careful. Holiness is essential in our lives, as we talked about this morning. I'll return you to your original condition. Again in verse number 3, I'm going to make you like a wilderness. Desolate. Useless. Not inhabited. Again in chapter 3, I'll make you like a dry... Chapter 2, verse 3, I'll make you like the dry land. So he tells her to get rid of these whoredoms. I'm going to strip you naked. I'm going to set you as in the day you were born. I'm going to make you as a wilderness. I'm going to set you as a dry land. I'm going to slay you with thirst. So it's all right there in one verse. These are the series of threats that He's making. This is what's coming. You're going to be like a dry land, and you're going to be slain with thirst. And then verse 4, He follows it up with one more. And I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms. A lack of mercy on Israel's children. I'm not going to try to explain all that. I don't know that I really understand it all. I can only just tell you that that's what God said. That because of the spirit of whoredoms that had entered into the nation, He said that I'm even going to remove the mercy from your children. Many times in the Old Testament, God told Israel to go into a nation and wipe out the men and the women and the children and the sucking child, the infants. And, a lot of people battle and struggle with that. How could God do that? I'm not going to offer anything, I'd just be offering my opinion that what I think. I think because God said to Abraham, I'll give you that nation, but you can't, or that land, you can't have it yet because they have not filled up their iniquity just yet. When they filled up the iniquity, that's when God brought Israel in and allowed them to take the land of Canaan. And I think that the reason He told them to kill them all, no matter how old they were, because they'd already proven what they are. They have already shown that no matter how long they're given, and how much mercy they're shown, and how many preachers are sent to them, and how many miracles are revealed to them, they have it in their heart to rebel and reject God. And so He said, wipe them out. They have given themselves over to it. So, can God be merciless on the infants? Yeah. The world loves that, don't they? Love to talk about our God without mercy. I'm not going to answer for it. I'm going to let God do all the answering on that. Okay? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I hope you understand that. I'm not saying, well, God, you can answer for yourself. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying I don't know if I understand that. I don't have that light yet. If you got that light this week, buy me a coffee and educate me. Okay? All right. Chapter 4. And verse number 10. The spirit of whoredoms had caused Israel to depart from the Lord. It resulted in His threatenings of what was coming. And then it caused Israel not to increase when they should have increased. Chapter 4, verse number 10. For they shall eat and not have enough. They shall commit whoredom and shall not increase, because they have left off to take heed to the Lord. So again, they just won't increase. Maybe sometimes the reason churches or people don't increase is because of this spirit of whoredoms. Verse 11. Whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. So the spirit of whoredoms combined with the wines had taken their hearts away from God. Verse number 12. My people ask counsel at their stocks, and their staff declareth unto them, for the spirit of whoredoms hath caused them to err, and they have gone a-whoring from under their God. So it had caused them to err. In other words, they took counsel at the stocks and then said, God's our God. Well, it caused them to err. You can't say God's my God, but then get your counsel from something that's not godly. Whether it be the Bible or the Spirit of God or from another believer or whatever it is that uses the Word of God, you can't do that. There's error to be found there. You understand what I'm saying? So, if God's our God, that's where our counsel comes from. That's where we bow down to. And then verses 13 and 14 of the same chapter. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills under oaks and poplars and elms, because the shadow thereof is good. Therefore your daughters shall commit whoredoms, and your spouses shall commit adultery. I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your spouses when they commit adultery, for themselves are separated with whores, and their sacrifice with harlots. Therefore the people that doth not understand shall fall. I mean, this is rough language. It's very rough here. He's just very plain. And we have here that their whoredoms is passed on to their children. And again, parents, man, our children, they learn from us. Learn by watching, learn by hearing, learn by just the actions that they're observing, how we treat one another, and the attitudes. Children pick up on attitudes. It's incredible. And so God said, what you've done is you've taken that spirit of whoredoms and you've passed that on to your children. So maybe there's your answer to how God can say, kill the children. If they have that spirit, then they're sunk already. Verse 18, same chapter. Their drink is sour. They have committed whoredom continually. Her rulers with shame do love. Give ye. So they love that idea of give me, give to me, give to me, give ye. You know, I'm not going to give. It's more blessed to give than to receive. That's not the way the rulers were. They were saying, you give, you give. That's what they loved. The spirit of whoredoms, the act of whoredoms, it becomes habitual. And that's what had happened to them. It was just habitual. It was just that's just what they did now. They bowed themselves down to idols. It's what they did. Chapter 5 and verse number 3, I know Ephraim and Israel is not hid from me, for now, O Ephraim, thou committest whoredom, and Israel is defiled. And then chapter 6, verse number 10, I have seen an horrible thing in the house of Israel. There is the whoredom of Ephraim. Israel is defiled. And so it had caused them to be defiled. And then lastly, and we're finished here, chapter 5 and verse number 4, they will not frame their doings to turn unto their God, for the spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them, and they have not known the Lord. So the Spirit had caused them not to turn their doings unto the Lord. The framing their doings, they haven't turned themselves unto the Lord. They haven't committed themselves to it. That's what the Spirit had done. All right, so that's a pretty negative way to end, I said. But we'll start off on a positive note next time, Israel's future. So we just see there in that conclusion, the love of God for His people, the descriptions that God gave of Israel, and here we see as the last important aspect for the night is just what the spirit of whoredoms does to a nation. The spirit of idolatry, okay? And so, little children, keep yourself from idols. That's what John said. Little children, keep yourself from idols. Keep it out of the church, keep it out of your life. It will destroy you. All right, Father, thank you again for the night. And I trust that the Bible study, the teaching, is still helpful. There's so much application there. And I've tried to do my best to just make a few comments and move on without getting bogged down. Lord, there is a great warning in the nation of Israel. You said in the New Testament that the things that are written aforetime were written for our learning. And there's so much to learn from these people. Lord, keep us from making the same errors that they made. Help us to be conscious of the things that they were guilty of that we might not let into our lives, our families, our marriages, our church. God, keep us from being idolatrous. That's really what was so much at the root of what happened in their nation. They lost the great privilege that you had given them. They lost the great name. They lost the blessings. Lord, it is beyond me. I don't know why we have the nature within us that we are, as the song says, prone to wander. And I wish it wasn't that way. I wish that nature was removed and that we would always have a heart to love, follow, respect, and honor you and your word. But you know that we're but flesh. And you know what we're like, that sinfulness that's battling it out with us all the time. And you know, Lord, that if we will simply commit ourselves to do what's right all the time and to follow your word in spite of what we think, and if we will have a passion for you and feed the spiritual man, that we can gain the strength to overcome the flesh and not be given over to the sin that it commits. So I pray for our people tonight in our church that you would help us to overcome that, to be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. And we'll give you all the credit for it, because if you left us on our own, we would destroy ourselves in a snap. So I want you to be lifted up, Lord, and I want you to be lifted up in our church. We thank you again for your goodness. And I pray thou, as we go into the week, that you give us a good rest, and that you'd help us to honor you as we go into the workforce. Give us chances to be a witness of Jesus Christ. Let us see some people saved, even this week, if you'd let us. Keep us mindful of our relationship with you and our position with you. And I want to thank you again in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty.